Hey everybody, welcome back. We are now switching gears. We are moving away from Europe for the time being, and we're going to go over to the Pacific and catch you up there until 1944. And then, like we said in our last episode, we're going to focus most specifically on Europe until the end of the war, and then we're going to hit the Pacific to the end of the war.
Yeah.
So let's start off. We've really, gosh, we got bogged down a little bit in the major turning points here, especially after 42. We had the Battle of Coral Sea.
Right, which is the first time that we even got a draw.
Correct.
Our first victory, which is a tie on the board.
Well, you know what? We're going to take whatever we can get, because before 1942, we were just getting slammed.
Really? Well, yeah. It was a litany of disasters.
You know, especially right after Pearl Harbor. Right.
The fall of Wake, the fall of Hong Kong, the fall of Guam, Manila, Corregidor.
Everything.
I mean, just the headlines. I've never seen a compilation, which would be a good thing to kind of have at the beginning of those little banners where you show newspapers.
Yeah.
That'd be really of a cool effect to have, show headlines showing this disasters one after the other.
Well, you can't tell me that after MacArthur leaves Philippines in early 42.
Yeah, May of 42?
Yeah, you can't tell me that after what had happened there on the island of, or the part of that island of Corregidor.
Yeah,
and then, of course, you know, the Bataan Death March.
Mm-hmm.
These people at home are looking at it and they're like, why are we even here?
Oh, gosh.
Seriously, why are we even trying to fight a group of people who are going to destroy us?
Well, we can't find them on maps.
No. Well,
I go to Grandpa's globe, and they're not there because they're tiny specks.
Right.
I mean, Guam is almost impossible to find on any globe.
And again, if it wasn't for World War II, I don't think anyone would ever know where Guam was.
Not unless you'd travel the South Pacific looking for places to hang out.
Yeah, and why would you do that? But anyway, the idea now is that after mid 1942.
Right. Well, I mean, we literally have him leaving Corregidor in May.
Yes.
Corregidor falls in June.
Yes.
And then in July we have Midway.
Right.
So despite the fact that things are creaking and falling, still the dominoes are still toppling in the area that Japan initially attacked.
Yes.
The war's already taken a different turn because it's got to move into the open ocean.
Right.
Closer to Pearl.
Right.
Closer to our strength.
And it definitely makes it easier for American naval power to suppress a lot of that the Japanese assault that they had for so long. You know, after Midway, honestly, after Midway, in the loss of 4 of the Japanese aircraft carriers.
So if you add it to Coral Sea, 5 carriers in 2 months.
So again, and that is a huge devastation to the Japanese Navy, because that's their heart and soul. The aircraft carrier really is what brings them to the forefront of many of these talks of naval power.
Oh, I mean, when we talk about naval air power, specifically carriers, the Japanese are innovators. They are, I won't say they're the inventors, but they're real close on the cutting edge of who's going to use this in the future. They believe in naval aviation and its ability to sink ships. The British aren't real big believers, and they get taught lessons by those little guys who got slanty eyes so they can't bomb well. That's from British reports.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
racist much?
It doesn't stop there. No, trust me.
No, it doesn't. It gets worse as the war goes on. But still, there weren't a lot of believers in air power other than Billy Mitchell in the United States.
True.
And obviously, despite the fact that he gets court-martialed because he's such a rapscallion.
Yes.
We end up with a lot of carriers.
Right.
Because we have, just like the Japanese, we're looking at the Pacific. We don't have planes that can patrol the Pacific well, even from our islands, because it's so big.
Well, and again, you're looking at just the distance between mainland America, San Diego, San Francisco, LA, to Pearl.
Oh, yeah.
Is what?
3,000 miles?
Anywhere between 3,500 and 4,000 miles. That's a lot of area, just a straight line.
Yeah, just a straight line.
We're not talking the square miles that would be involved in that whole area.
And when you
to
start
try to
talking about
defend.
submarines, now we're in cubic miles.
Whew, no, thank you.
It's crazy.
That's why I'm a history teacher, not a math teacher.
That's right.
But again, by early 43, we're now taking it to the Japanese side.
Well, because we're finishing up in Guadalcanal.
True.
That doesn't finish till later in 43. That's a long, slogged battle because, one, we don't know what we're doing.
No.
Honestly, we have no idea what to do with jungle warfare.
Well,
our Marines are well under-equipped and well under-trained for what they were asked to do.
And plus, you have people who are, 18, 19, 20 years old, just after Pearl. Mm-hmm. They're signing up. They get maybe at most 8 weeks.
I think they got 12 in the Marines.
Okay,
that's why they were considered elite.
Oh,
because the Army usually got 6 to 8.
Yeah. Okay, and then within that 12 weeks, you
got everything.
you got AIT. You got basic and AIT.
Yeah.
Which again,
when we look at a World War II Army and compare it to the training level of our Army today, these guys might as well just come right off the street.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Exactly. Yes.
It's a hard thing to explain unless you've been in it.
Right.
But when I was in school in the Army, I started with basic training in June, and I didn't get done my training until March of the next year.
Right.
So, as opposed to some of these guys in World War II would have literally been drafted, trained, already shipped to Europe, and been on a boat back for being wounded.
Right.
By the time I got trained.
What, that year? a little
9
under
months.
9 months, yeah. So, even then, it's just you have no idea what you're looking at.
Well, and we don't.
But
we don't have a lot of tropical areas to fight in to practice.
Right. Where were we going to go? Were we going to go to Cuba?
Florida? Well, we could go to Cuba, but nothing to get done at that time.
No, you're
Cuba
right.
was like a vacation spot.
Yeah. Let me just sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais.
Gamble in the casinos.
All
That was all that was going on. But so we have to come up with a plan.
Sure.
Attacking Guadalcanal is really a laboratory almost. How do we get on the beach? How do we hold territory? How do we protect our supply lines? We learn a lot from just this one little campaign. And it's a hard, bloody process because we get some of these guys, the guys that initially landed, like you're talking about, some of these 1st Marine Division guys are literally pre-war guys.
Right.
In fact, most of the 1st Marine Division is pre-war Marines,
That's true.
Not draftees.
Right.
Because they're sent out fairly quickly to try to establish America's presence in the war. And they get stuck on that island when our Navy gets run off.
And they're bogged down.
And they are, well, in some cases, having talked to some of the veterans of Guadalcanal, they are naked.
Yes.
Because their uniforms are literally rotting off their bodies because of the humidity. They're running out of ammunition, so they're using Japanese weapons, which they don't think much of. Because they're garbage. It's horrible to say about a whole army's weaponry, but it's a horribly built bolt-action rifle that would have been good in 1895, but it's not now, especially against the M1 Garand.
But again, you got to think about it. Japan hasn't fought much of a war.
No, they've been fighting people who are much lower than... I mean, some of the Chinese cannons were literally still front-loading.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So comparatively, the Japanese look like Buck Rogers.
Yeah. Pew, pew,
until they
pew,
start
pew.
fighting the Americans who know Buck Rogers.
Yes.
We haven't met a gadget we don't like.
Right. That's for sure.
But really talking about that, just the difference in rifles. And this goes to all theaters.
Yeah.
The United States is the only nation to use an M1, a semi-automatic clip-fed, technically speaking.
Sure.
Clip-fed because it goes over the top and the clip goes away when you're using it.
Right.
Everybody else is still using bolt-action rifles.
Right.
British, Germans, British use the Lee Enfield, same weapon they used in the Boer War.
Yay!
So 50 years ago.
Yeah.
The Russians are still using bolt-action. They do have more semi-automatics, but as soon as the war starts, they quit making them.
Right.
Because it's easier to make the bolt action. They're cheaper. You can get them out to the combat troops faster.
There you go.
Japanese are using, Arasaka. Same thing. Germans using the Mauser. 98K. 98 is the year. 1898.
Oh, jeez.
Which the Mauser is an impressive weapon for accuracy. People loved it as a sniper rifle.
But again,
it's got a weird bolt, sticks out sideways, gets caught on everything. It's only got a 5-shot magazine. And the M1, literally, this guy can 8 shots.
And then
twing!
And then you
As it
push
rejects.
it back. Yes, I
But then
remember
you just,
hearing those.
boom, it just...
And it's literally...
the firepower is exponentially higher.
Right.
Which, especially when you start talking close combat.
Right.
In the jungle.
Right.
That kind of level of firepower makes a huge difference. You don't see the difference in Europe where the battles are farther apart.
Sure.
The bolt action only having 5 shots isn't as crucial.
Right.
Because you don't have time to make up the distance.
Right.
Yeah, you shot 8 and he shot 5. Okay, well, that's not too much of a difference.
No.
But when you're this far away...
Literally between you and I.
Yeah, when you're 10 feet away and you're shooting through brush... most shots wins.
Yes, exactly. And again, now the Japanese do have some type of the machine gun, but it's still
very, very British looking with the banana clip on the top.
Correct. Even their more the stationary machine gun that would have the 3-team, the 3-person team. That is very bulky. It's very
heavy. World War One.
Correct. And they're it's almost like a zipper fed, I believe is what it was called.
Yes. It was kind of like the clip for the Garand, except it fed through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
really
weird.
It
was easy to get jammed, and anyway.
It just had to, if it got cockeyed even the slightest bit, like you bumped it when you were moving it.
Right.
You jam.
You're done. But regardless of what we see here.
But it's huge in the sense when we start talking about these island fights. These are close quarters battles in so many cases.
Well,
that the Marines are digging people out of holes.
Right.
Firepower and the machines that you're using become incredibly vital. Just the grenades.
Exactly.
Our grenades are literally designed to kill people.
Right.
Isn't that a weird concept that you would design a weapon of war to kill people? But nobody else seemed to think that's a great idea. They used mainly just high explosive grenades, what we would call a flashbang.
Yeah.
There are numerous accounts of both German and Japanese grenades landing literally next to people and exploding, and they don't die. They lose their hearing.
I was going to say, case in point, there's a perfect example of a Marine. Cannot remember his name. His name will escape me here. It will be here shortly. Just give me a sec. In fact, his name is Jack Lucas. Okay. Jack Lucas, who is, and again, we're getting ahead of ourselves with this, but
fine.
It is what it is. He's on Iwo Jima. And there are multiple Japanese grenades thrown in his direction of a patrol 3-4 men, and he's just jumps on them.
That became almost a sport. It seemed like on Iwo Jima.
Exactly.
I mean, Marines because the fighting was so close.
Right.
You don't just have one Japanese guy who can throw a grenade at you. There's 3 or 4.
Right. But again, the idea is that you don't see the explosive power as the United States grenades would be. This guy survived having, 2 grenades underneath him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
yes,
what?
I remember reading about that guy. I didn't remember his name at all.
Well,
but yeah, but just numerous accounts. We see it in Saving Private Ryan.
Right.
The guy when they're looking for Private Ryan and they're talking to the guy who had the grenade go off right by his head.
Yeah,
exactly. He can't hear anything.
Exactly,
but it let off by his head. If you had a grenade go off right by your head, an American grenade, most of your head's somewhere else.
Right.
Because it's designed out of cast iron, so it fragments.
Right. Exactly.
And you're just gonna be hurting. And we think of this, but it's a huge multiplier to the ability to fight, and it goes from grenades and rifles and pistols, for that matter.
Sure.
All the way to the aircraft.
Right.
I mean, in 1943, we start seeing the F-6F Hellcat deployed, which is a much better plane than the F-4F Wildcat. That was the beginning of the war.
Well, just the name itself would make it better.
Yeah, you got to think it's better. And the F-4U Corsair, the famous Pappy Boyington gull wing plane. The Japanese are still using Zeros.
Something that
doesn't change until doesn't change.
No.
And they have some improved models, a little bit bigger engine, but their weapon is the same. They don't ever armor them.
Yeah.
What was a very fast, very effective fighter at the beginning of the war is obsolete. by 44.
Well,
Honestly.
if you don't change your technology, if you don't change your weaponry, you're doomed to fail.
You're going to be obsolete. I mean, and we see it really on the Germans, or the European side, the competition.
Right.
Germans deploy this, so the Allies deploy that, and then
Right.
You see the back and forth go really fast. In the Pacific, it's more one-sided.
America deploys this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and the Japanese are just like...
Really, the biggest thing we see in the Pacific is the deployment of faster-firing, higher magazine capacity weapons because of the banzai charges. The ability to get rid of a lot of bullets really fast.
Right.
Because of the way they fight.
Yeah.
And it carries on into Korea, for that matter. Same concept.
For sure.
Which is why we end up in Vietnam with the M16.
Yeah.
Something that can put out a lot of bullets really, really fast.
15-round clip, and you're good.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot. But regardless of the weaponry, we see now the Americans finally taking the offensive, taking charge.
Yes.
And it really does break into a two-pronged attack.
Yes.
From
you're right.
from southern Australia down in Sydney.
Mm-hmm. And who's in charge of that?
And that would be General Douglas MacArthur, who
Big Mac.
After fleeing the Philippines in late 41, early 42, he takes his family down into Sydney where they are preparing. He does again say, "I shall return," and well, it happened. On the other side, eventually, right. On the other side of the two-prong attack, we see Admiral Nimitz. Chester Nimitz.
I can't say Chesty. Chesty Puller is a Marine.
Right.
A lot of Chesters in this time frame.
Well, you know,
name kind of fell out of favor.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met a Chester that wasn't of that generation.
No. I met a Chet, but not Chester.
Yeah.
Anyway, the idea, of course, was that we were going to island hop. And the most important thing was we were going to take strategic islands, regardless of their size, regardless of where they may have been. We're going to take those specific islands to let the others die on the vine.
Yeah, we're just going to bypass them and starve them out.
Exactly. So kind of what we do, especially as MacArthur is leading up into the Philippines, he kind of takes the northwestern route of the Pacific.
To be honest, he takes the harder route.
He does.
New Guinea's fighting is really brutal.
Right.
Mountainous jungle. Which the two worst terrains to fight in.
Exactly.
I guess Arctic jungle would be the word. Which would be hard to find, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. A little bit. But, I mean, Nimitz doesn't have that good of a way as well, because the logistical nightmare of going from literally Pearl Harbor down into Marshall Islands.
1,000 miles into the Carolines?
Right. You're moving into places that are, okay, and we said this earlier, we said, how many sea rations do you need? How much fuel do you have? How much ammunition do you need? Because you're not going to have just a boat trottling along behind you to say, oh, here you go, here's some reinforcements.
How many P-38s? And I don't mean planes. I mean little openers for your camp sea rations.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have one, life's
you're
miserable.
Done. Yeah, you're kind of like, oh, shoot.
I'm going to shoot through an aluminum can.
I bet they would.
Well, they used their bayonet on it.
Well, yeah.
Which I can't imagine how many people ended up with stitches from the corpsman when they're opening with the bayonet.
Yeah. But regardless of it, we see now places that are just... You can't even pronounce the names.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
These places these guys take on. I mean, of course, the Marines, if you've ever seen the miniseries The Pacific, which is, of course, based off of a wonderful autobiography, couple of wonderful autobiographies, talking about the run-up into Iwo. But the plan of taking Pavuvu, taking Peleliu, and they're like, we don't even need to be here.
Except it's a big enough island to put a port, even an artificial port, and it has a big airfield.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
But again, the fighting is just horrendous. It's horrendous fighting. It's literally, like we mentioned, hand-to-hand fighting. You're within feet from each other, and...
You don't expect a samurai sword to be an effective weapon in the 20th century, and it's still getting used.
Yeah. You're exactly right.
I mean, it's... Because the Japanese, not so much on the surrender team.
Well, of course they're not on the surrender team.
And as the war goes on, it gets worse as opposed to better. Most of the time, when you see a war going on the downslide, you see like the Italians.
Right.
Perfectly normal response. Your team's losing. If you get caught in a bad situation, you surrender because you know you're already losing. There's no reason to die at this stage of the war. Japanese go the completely other way. There are more surrenders on Guadalcanal than there are on Iwo Jima.
Because again, you have the publicity, you have the propaganda of the Japanese imperial, for the lack of a better term, the imperial just press coming out and say, listen, you do not surrender to anyone. We don't want to have, of course, Japanese ideology of how they deal with this is just unreal. I mean, honestly, if you're an American and they were to say, don't surrender, you're going to be like, are you kidding me?
I mean, we have good examples. You know, Alamo is way up in our history and things like that, but it still doesn't change the fact that Guam, Wake, Corregidor, Philippines all did surrender initially. Right. You might put up a long fight, but you're not going to keep fighting when it becomes hopeless. Well, if you're out of food or you're out of ammunition, it's time to quit.
That's exactly what happened on Corregidor.
Yeah,
those 75,000 Filipino and American troops, they're just getting beaten senseless.
Well, yeah, constant shelling,
by these Japanese, and they're just like, I can't go any further. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd much rather just try to survive in a POW camp, which unfortunately doesn't happen very well for most of those men. Mm-hmm. But at least it's better than continuing this no winning situation.
Right. It's Bushido, but it's toxic Bushido. Right. If you would take a modern terminology.
Right.
It's literally distilled all the really angry, violent parts about Bushido. Now, Bushido is not a lovey, cuddly ideology of its own, but it has places for surrender, honorable surrender, and things like that. And at this point, they start that stuff just starts weeding out.
Right.
And it causes, and of course the propaganda. That's probably a good place to talk about the propaganda on both sides.
Right.
Portraying the enemy as less than human.
I'm sorry to do this, but...
Oh, exactly. All the cartoons were exaggerated.
Big buck teeth.
Yeah, big buck. That was making fun of Tojo.
I understand that.
He did have buck teeth.
but again, the idea of just the racially motivated propaganda of the Americans. We're gonna get the nips.
Yeah. I mean, we were in the Japanese press. We were barbarians, hairy barbarians that were going to kill and rape their women,
barbecue their children.
Maybe in that order.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably so. The
propaganda, and it goes way back to our discussion when we talk about slavery.
Sure,
the other,
right?
Calling the other, making it easier to kill somebody because you make them less human. It's a tried and tested thing in war, and you see it in every war. GIs, I'm most familiar with American wars. In every war, Americans come up with a slang term that demeans their enemy.
Kraut,
Haji, Gook.
Right.
I mean, they're just all there. Some of them are racist. Some of them are just there.
Like a nip.
A nip, which is just short for Nipponese. Same as a Jap is short for Japanese. It'd be kind of like the French calling us ami.
Right.
For short for American.
Right.
So.
Well, in French, that would actually mean friend, but whatever.
That too.
Regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But again, the propaganda of, again, the Japanese as well. You got to realize this is the guy who is a living god. The emperor.
Well, that's true.
And you're telling your people, as the emperor, not to bring dishonor to me as a living god. And so it does present even more
that
problems.
Living God won't take you into heaven. Basically.
Exactly.
And what's worse is it's a very distilled. It had been for 200 years?
Right.
The emperors really hadn't been in charge.
They have not.
Politically
since really the Meiji Restoration.
That was 1800s.
So you're looking at probably even beforehand.
Yeah, because I know for the shogunate, the shoguns were in charge.
Right.
Not the emperor.
No.
But the emperor's been there for thousands of years.
Yes. But again, just as the figurehead.
Yes.
But it just...
a divine figurehead.
Yes, for sure. And it makes it more difficult for these people as we move closer and closer to the ultimate goal, and that is the Japanese islands.
Yes. As we head there, especially once we hit technically Iwo, but nobody lives there.
No, nobody lives there, but there's a large number of Japanese soldiers there.
Yes. But, I mean, Okinawa was the first time we land on
goodness.
Japanese soil. What
Correct.
they've considered Japanese from all time. You know, yeah, once they conquer it, they consider Guam Japanese too, but it's not the same.
They consider Korea Japanese.
You know, kind of like the Aleutian Islands we talked about off camera.
Yes.
Yes, it's a deal because they took Alaskan Islands, but it didn't motivate anybody to go to war in America.
No.
It would be not like invading California.
No. Nothing.
Despite the fact
Nothing
it's
like
on
that.
the same continent.
It doesn't matter. They're in 2 different time zones.
What, the islands?
Yes. Exactly.
But it is the propaganda level is it's definitely not something to sneeze at. But as the war gets more and more violent, which is hard to imagine, it's a war. It's already about as violent as you can get. But no,
it's going to get worse.
More. Just the ferocity. We don't see that except on the Eastern Front in the European War.
True.
The level of ferocity that we get. We get small unit actions that are very fierce on the Western Front.
But nothing
compared to the Pacific.
No.
I mean, there's no equivalent to Tarawa.
No, there isn't.
For the Americans in Europe. There's just nothing even close. Anzio may be closest, and that's not even... It's not even the same ballpark.
No. You're not you're not even in the same section.
But I mean, we start with Guadalcanal, which is no picnic at all.
Oh, goodness.
It's just brutal for, 8 months?
Yes. Constant battling.
Starvation, battles, jungles... Crocodiles?
Yeah.
What? Fighting the Japanese is bad enough. I can fight crocodiles.
Fight a crocodile in the middle of a creek that I'm trying to find a Japanese in the middle of the night? No, thank you.
In the middle of a creek that I can only see 10 feet in either direction. Exactly. And it turns back into jungle.
Exactly.
Boom.
Oh, it's unreal.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
But anyway, and we start seeing, what is it, on Saipan?
Mm-hmm.
That we first start seeing the mass suicides of civilians. Mm-hmm. But that's as we go forward.
Yes, that's a story for the next episode when we get back into the Pacific.
The amazing thing about this 2-pronged offensive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it sounds like a waste of resources, really.
Right.
Just pick a goal and stick with it.
No.
But the thing is, America is so economically and industrially powerful. This is an option. And this is on the front that's considered secondary.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Europe is our primary focus.
Yeah.
We declared that right after the war started.
Right.
We did what was that?
Well, it was before. It was the Atlantic Charter
That's right, the Atlantic Charter.
And we were going to go to the European front first.
That was
deal with the Japanese later.
And part of that's because we needed naval power, and that takes longer to build up.
That's true.
But it's towards the end of 43 and into 44 that we see that this naval power has come to fruition. I mean, we need big boat cops with little vests and flashlights to keep people from running into each other.
Exactly.
There are so many ships.
Exactly.
You know, whereas we were fighting the war with 2 carriers after Midway.
Right.
Now, 2 carriers, nobody even notices them.
Right.
And they're obsolete.
Right.
Because the new carriers...
We've constantly changed our technologies. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. If you can say a war is a great idea. I mean,
look up, when did we shoot down Yamamoto? Because I'm pretty sure that's coming up here real soon. Maybe even in this period. But we are late 1943, early 1944. Really, April of 1943. We shoot him down.
Yep.
It's an assassination mission, really. P-38, a squadron of P-38 fighters, which are really long range. They're the ones with the weird boxy shape, the twin tail fins that connect.
Yeah.
But they're very long range. In fact, they were used in Europe briefly at the beginning because of their range.
Right.
To help escort bombers. But because we'd broken their codes, we found out his itinerary, and they chased down his plane and shot it down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Operation Vengeance, as it was called. Yes. Crazy.
But his prediction that we're going to wake the sleeping giant really begins to tell. And when we talk about the Battle of the Philippine Sea, that's going to be... We're going to run some numbers and it's going to be a lot of fun.
You're going to feel real happy about some of the things we talked about.
It's going to be, in fact, I think when the comparisons especially will show you just exactly what happened. So, That'll be next. Well, not next time, because from now on, well, at least for the next few episodes, we're going to go back to Europe, and we're going to stay there. We're going to finish it out. We're going to finish it out in the next couple weeks, and then we'll come back to the Pacific Theater. Because I think it'll just be easier for everybody, including us, to keep track of where we're at.
Yeah, I think so. It makes it a lot easier for everyone to kind of get
especially
on
as
the same track.
Things happen so quickly.
Correct.
So,
all right. Again, make sure you give us a like, follow, and make sure to share.